brief. I submitted a detailed report over the weekend to you, but I guess the new information that I wanted to share was that today, Mayor Stallings and I and Mayor Pro Tem Bond met with our leadership, the counterparts with the county, and we were able to talk with the health department and with Brian Harville from Edenton Chowan. And we heard from Brian about Biden's surge plan. And then we also heard from the health department officials about where they think, you know, the region is. They keep emphasizing to us that, you know, the virus is here, community spread is taking place. They were pleased with the work that the town and the county leadership is doing to help send the right message to our citizens about how vitally important it is for all of us to be practicing social distancing, and also to be practicing good personal hygiene, and to stay at home as much as possible, and only to leave your homes to conduct essential business, to purchase essential goods and supplies, or to care for others, and then also to take time for individual outdoor recreation at following socially distant guidelines. So we got the sense that our community is doing well, but we have to remain vigilant. It's going to be a long, steep hill for us to climb, but together we're going to be able to reach the top, and then hopefully rebound and get back to our new normal way of life. They won't make any predictions as to when that's going to happen. There are a lot of models out there. We heard anywhere from sometime in the next 2 weeks for the peak in North Carolina to as late as the middle of May. But the state is working really hard to make sure that we're getting the most reliable information. So please continue to be vigilant. We're going to be pushing out some more videos. Some of the council members have volunteered to do some videos, and to keep encouraging all of our residents to do the right thing and make a difference. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
I would add to that it was a very informative meeting. It was an hour and a half long meeting, but the health director had all of his staff there with him to answer any type questions, and they gave us some very good leadership items that we needed to follow. And Brian Harville was there from the hospital, and he gave us a lot of insight as to what the hospital is doing and what they're prepared for and this type of thing. But it was a very informative meeting. It was very worthwhile meeting. Does anybody else have any questions of Anne Marie at this time?
I have one question. Anne Marie, did they give an idea of whether we still have one person in the county who has been tested positive, or do we have more?
That's a good question, and we did spend a lot of time on testing, trying to understand. So there are private medical providers, perhaps in our county, and then in other counties, who are caring for our citizens. And then also there could be private medical providers in Virginia who are caring for our citizens and who may or may not have tested citizens. So we know for sure that the county and the region is in the phase of community spread. So we should not be we shouldn't be comforted by looking at that state map and seeing only one positive case in Chowan County, because there could be other cases where testing was done by a private lab and then not reported, or we are hearing that some medical providers, for valid reasons, are not administering a test when they know that the patient has all three symptoms, because it doesn't make sense to use a test kit, which is a vital resource, when they know the person has it by all the diagnosis and symptoms. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to testing, and we're going to spend some time trying to message that, so that people don't get a false sense of security that just because there's one positive test doesn't mean that there's only one person here with the virus. Does that help answer that question?
Thank you.
Anne-Marie, one more question. Do you happen to know the current census at the hospital? Do they have adequate vacant beds? Do they have ample equipment to handle any other emergencies? You know?
I can't speak to the exact census, but we did get the sense clearly that they have a plan for providing for additional beds, that the system as well as our local hospitals. So we were encouraged by their plans to be able to ramp up for additional capacity.
Good to hear that.
And Brian said at this time, they have ample supplies of everything. You wouldn't know what it was going to be like 2 weeks down the road or 30 days down the road, but today, as of today, he had ample supplies.
Would you think Biden Hospital corporate would share these supplies among all their different facilities if the need arises? Did they mention anything about that?
Oh yes,
Yes.
that's a vital part of their system, and that's one of the many benefits of our hospital being a part of a big system, that they'll be able to get resources. Biden Show On will, at a time of need when, if a little hospital was out on their own, it would be really difficult.
Good. Thank you.
He said he could make a phone call and they would send adequate beds down here right away.
Great.
Any other questions for Anne-Marie? If not, we need a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So move, Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now we'll move into our administrative things that we've got to. And the first one will be the administrative committee, and that's chaired by Councilman High.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. The first item we need to discuss is the review of the draft 2020 vision statement. And each of you recall the hard work we put in at the work session with the facilitator. And we all had input into that. And then from there, we all had input into the actual text of that vision statement. But for the coronavirus, I would be recommending to full council that we consider adopting this at our next regular meeting. In light of coronavirus, there's so many potential implications that this could have on our budget and revenue stream, and also what we think is important moving forward. And I know it's important to put this thing in place, and I commend the council for having this as a priority. I personally feel like it would be better if we just put this on hold to see what everything looks like on the back end of this virus, to see where we are budgetarily wise, to see where we are as far as our revenue streams, and also more importantly, to see what's important to us post-COVID-19. Does anybody have any thoughts along those lines, either in agreement with that or in opposition to the recommendation that we simply table this indefinitely?
I think you're spot on. Hi.
I'm in agreement also.
Yeah, I think you're making good sense there. Yes.
Okay, well, it sounds like we have a general consensus, the staff and Anne Marie, if you could just table this and let's take a look at it at the appropriate time when we get through everything we're going through now. The second item that we need to discuss is an update on the reappointments for the boards and commissions. And I have a sneaky suspicion that COVID-19's had an effect on this also. But Anne Marie, if you can update us on how the reappointments to our boards and commissions has been going.
Yes, sir. So we have been contacting your board and commission members whose terms are expiring to get commitment as to their willingness to serve again. And then we also at the same time have been receiving applications from citizens who are interested in being appointed. I mentioned to Councilman High that in the past, the council has always wanted to conduct a short interview with prospective board and commission members prior to appointment. And in light of the virus, it would be my recommendation that we put off any formal appointments filling new board seats until we get past this state of emergency. But I would hope to have a recommendation for you to consider of the existing board members who are willing to be reappointed, and perhaps at your April 14th meeting, you could take action on those board members.
Okay, thanks, Anne Marie, and I appreciate your continued work on that. The next item that we have to consider is merely an update, and we don't need any action on this one either. But that item is the draft revisions to the minimum housing code, and Saoirse has been working hard on that in an attempt to rework our existing code. And Saoirse, if you could bring us up to date on just where we are on that process at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. So the last time I updated Town Council on the status of minimum housing was back in January, at the end of January. And at that point, I had just consulted with Mr. Ben Gallup about doing the updates and was preparing to send him some of my recommendations for us to finalize. And so at this point, I have sent him my recommendations for the updates to the minimum housing code, which were included in your agenda packet this week, I believe. And we are both working together to put that into some final language. And then we will have it reviewed by our housing code inspectors and then interested members of the public who may have some input. And that is, so I guess in short, at this point, Ben Gallup we are working on integrating the recommendations that I've made, or choosing which ones will best go with our code.
Okay, thank you. As always, Saoirse, the last item will require some action on our part. We have been requested by Chief Bass and the fire department to consider a resolution encouraging our businesses to allow firefighters to respond to calls during working hours. And Anne Marie, is Chief Bass in attendance tonight?
He is on the line. Chief,
okay.
can you hear us?
Chief Bass,
Here. I'm here.
how are you doing tonight?
Fine. How are you?
Doing fine. Did you have anything? It looks like it's a fairly straightforward resolution, but if you had anything you wanted to tell the council members that you thought was important as we consider the resolution, please feel free to do so.
Sure. This resolution would help us a lot as far as getting some of our volunteers to respond to calls. Right now, we do a pretty good job of having our volunteers being able to leave work, but there's a couple of people that are trying to get in now. I know one of them works at Jimbo's, and the other one is working somewhere else in town that's got a business he's not working, know if he can respond or not. So this would help us get some extra help during the daytime. The daytime hours is where we're always hurting with numbers. Usually out of 32 people in the department, usually about 10 or 12 show up for fire calls. So this would help us get those guys out of work and on the fire scenes to help us.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Do any of the other administrative committee members or any other members have any comments regarding the proposed resolution?
Not at this time.
Okay, anyone else? The recommendation I would make in this regard is to move this on to full council with the recommendation to full council that we adopt the resolution and try to help out Chief Bass any way we can.
I'll second that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that concludes the business of the administrative committee, and I'll hand it back over to Mayor Stallings for the remainder of the agenda.
Thank you, Councilman High. The next item on our agenda is our Finance Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Dixon.
Well, this is a very happy day for the Finance Committee. We are getting ready to set a procedure to sell the houses that the town now owns in the redevelopment zone, so that the people in those neighborhoods will have neighbors, not rundown properties. And I think it's a really tribute to the whole team for getting us this far. And it's my understanding that we're going to do it by upset bid. There's a process in the North Carolina General Statutes, which are 45-21.27, that allows us to advertise the property and then sell them by upset bid. Do we need any more on that, Anne Marie, or is that all we need to just, I'll put that in the form of a motion unless somebody needs to discuss it further.
Saoirse is going to be taking the lead for us, and we're working on, we've been collecting a list of people who have told us that they're interested in knowing when the properties go up for sale. So Saoirse, did you want to say a few words about the process?
Yeah, sure. As Councilman Dixon just said, the process that we are going to be using to sell the properties in our redevelopment zones it is upset bid, and in redevelopment zones, we have authority to do that under Article 12 of General Statutes, Chapter 160A, and then specifically in Section 269 gives us the authority to do that, to sell properties in redevelopment zones via upset bid. That process is pretty straightforward. How it will work for the properties is once we are able to solicit an offer for each of the properties, at that point the upset bid process would begin. And so a local government in this scenario is able to privately negotiate or solicit offers from interested parties. And so people who would be interested in buying one of the properties in our redevelopment zones would submit a bid to town staff, and along with a 5% deposit of the amount of the bid. And at that point, though it's not required under the statutes, it's recommended by text from the School of Government that town council adopts a resolution outlining, or to tell the public that a bid has been received in to buy a property, and at that point the upset bid process would begin, and the property in question would be publicized along with the steps, along with the procedure that goes into purchasing the property. And so that requires us to publicize for a period of 10 days in which members of the public could submit a higher bid along with a 5% deposit on that bid for, sorry, I just noticed I'm trying to join. along with a deposit for that higher bid in the amount of 5%. If there are no higher bids, then once the 10-day period has passed, the redevelopment commission, which is town council, can either act to approve the bid or to repeat the process if they feel that they could get a higher bid. And if they do choose to approve the bid, then it would officially approved by town council within 30 days. But since the redevelopment commission in this scenario is town council, that would take one approval. Two birds with one stone, I guess. So that's a brief overview of the process. And then, are there any questions from council? Oh, and of course, in this process, we do have covenants on the properties in our redevelopment zone. So any members of the public wishing to buy those properties would have to do so in line with those covenants. And then, yes.
I have a question. Tell me again how many properties we're talking about?
So we have 4 different properties right now. One of the properties has an A and B unit, so technically 5, but we are trying to sell the A and B unit together, so 4 different properties.
Okay. Is the purpose, are we looking at selling these to potential people who will live there, or are we selling to developers who will fix them up and resell or rent them? What are the restrictions on this?
So the restrictions that we have placed on this are mostly to do with houses that are either in or outside of the historic district. And so those are the covenants that people buying the properties would have to follow. As far as the specific use of the properties, as long as they are financially able to follow through with their project and they are in line with the restrictions of the covenants, then they are able to develop the property as they would wish.
And Roger, I'll jump in on that. I mean, one of the I think potential end users of these would be people that would restore them and use the historic tax credits that are available to help rebuild neighborhoods in situations like this.
I've walked down the last couple of days down several of the streets, Carteret, which might be outside the area, and West Albemarle and Gale, and all those streets. And it's a shame to see those houses sitting empty that are still in good shape. Are those the houses that we're talking about? Those type of houses that are sitting empty, uncared for? Well, the redevelopment zone has certain boundaries, and so Emery, I don't have the addresses sitting in front of me, but they're on East Gale and Church, and
so the properties in question are 123 East Gale Street, 133 East Gale Street, 136 East Albemarle Street, and then 304 East Church Street. And 304 is the property with an A and B parcel.
Okay.
And Roger, these are highly significant, some of them architecturally important African-American structures.
Councilman Dixon.
Yes.
I apologize for this just coming to me and not perhaps bringing it up earlier so I wouldn't catch you off guard or anything on this. I've got a little bit of
house behind him.
I've got a little bit of I keep hearing some background noise, but in the back of my mind, I've got the situation that we have with Hotel Hinton going on, where someone bought a structure from the county and town and is not doing anything with it. Are there going to be any guidelines in the covenants that new owner has a certain period of time to start the project and also to finish the project?
Yes, and I think Elizabeth, you wrote those basically. Do you have timelines in front of you?
I can tell you it's 12 months. to
Okay,
begin
great.
construction. And then I think there's a timeline for finishing up work. But Roger, you can also, or Councilman Coleman, you can also find these redevelopment plans with the maps showing where the properties are located on the town's website. They're also in my office, but obviously I'm not in my office right now. But if you want to, I can send you an email with a direct link to them.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I guess I'll put that in the form of a motion that we send that on, and we'll vote on it at our next, at the April meeting. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, well, I'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No. Motion carried.
That's it for the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sambo. All right, the next one on our agenda is the Public Works Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have one item on the agenda, and that's consideration of proposals for maintenance of town cemeteries. Let me give you just a little bit of background before we go on with this. In the past years, the grounds and maintenance operation at both the Beaver Hill and Vine cemeteries were performed by inmate labor program. Once that program ceased to operate, our town landscape crew took over this responsibility and have over the years struggled to maintain some type of efficiency. The previous council had asked the town's staff to solicit proposals from the grounds maintenance contractors in an effort not only to save money, but to be more grounds maintenance efficient at both cemeteries. Now, per Anne Marie's management report dated September 13th, Corey Gooden had already begun accepting proposals from contractors for grounds maintenance services at both cemeteries. Anne Marie, you want to take it from here? And where are we with those proposals?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Corey and Tosh have worked really hard over the winter developing written proposals, but then also meeting with prospective contractors, going over detailed expectations as to how the cemeteries should be maintained, you know, emphasizing that it is a special place and it needs special care. And Corey has received the proposals, and he and I have been working trying to identify funding that would allow you to contract with a contractor and really avoid having to allocate additional funding to make this work. So we received 3 proposals, and excuse me, we'll be sharing more written information, excuse me, with you between now and the next regular meeting. But I think it's fair to say that the low bid and the next low bidder were very competitive prices, anywhere between $75,000 a year to maintain all of our cemeteries. That includes Beaver Hill, Vine Oak, and the historic African American Cemetery. Corey has estimated some savings in one vacant position would not be filled, one position that's currently vacant. And then they have estimated what the costs are for maintenance, equipment, and that sort of thing. And that was about, that totals about $46,000. And I told Corey I would try to find, with Virginia's help, the remaining funds necessary to make this work. And I have an idea. One idea is that would raise a little bit of revenue would be to raise our cemetery fees. When we've looked at our fees in the past, they're very, very low. So I think we could generate a little bit of money by increasing the fees at the cemetery. You charge $600 for a cemetery plot. And so we're looking at raising that fee maybe by $100, and based on the amount of lots we sell, we think we could generate around $10,000 a year in revenue. And then we would find the balance in savings in other areas. So my goal is to present to you for your regular meeting on April 14th, a proposal with funding that would allow you to award a contract for a year, to try this for a year with a private contractor. And Corey, can you briefly explain to the council why you think that a contractor could do a different level of maintenance than what we're able to do?
So one of the things that we looked at when we decided to start soliciting proposals was just the general effectiveness that we had based on the head count of balancing the cemetery properties versus the other parks and lots and right-of-ways that the landscaping crews maintain. One of the things that Tosh and I had went through was the number of man hours that are required to maintain both cemeteries to the type of standard that we would want. One of the things that we found is when we lost the inmate workforce is that just the general man hours that we would need with the crews just wasn't there. We estimated what it would take to operate and maintain each cemetery with the head count that we had, and it's really a struggle for us to do a sufficient job with the number of personnel that we have, particularly with that division of public works, and also maintain the other areas. So one of the things that we looked at was not only the 7-month kind of growth cycle that cemeteries require as far as your landscaping upkeep, but we also looked at an entire 12-month. So we made that clear to all the contractors when they came in that this would be a 12-month rotation. They would do and perform all maintenance for the cemeteries other than during the fall as far as leaf pickup. The one thing that the town would assist with would be able to clean piles of leaves that those guys would leave for us, and they would schedule that with our landscaping crew to take the leaf truck and clean that up. So the costs that we had anticipated just for our head count is solely based on the 7-month growth cycle. This does not include the additional 5 months that the guys are in there during the fall, spring, and winter season doing maintenance as well. So when those bids came in and we saw how competitive they were over 12 months versus our 7-month cycle, we really knew we were on to something to try to let this process go. So I guess we'll have more to provide at the next meeting. I know this is a big thing for council to consider remotely, the way we're doing our meeting. But hopefully we'll have more to add for the next council meeting on the 14th.
Thanks, Corey. Mayor, I'd like to move this on to council, make a motion to move it on to council.
Okay, so move. Well, that ends our committee reports for today, and therefore ends our agenda for the meeting today. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in our first ever electronic council meeting. So I'll ask you to continue to stay safe, stay well, practice social distancing, good personal hygiene, and abide by the governor's stay-at-home order. And if everyone does their part, we will help to spread help to slow the spread of the virus and prevent the medical system from being overwhelmed by keeping individuals from being exposed to the virus and keeping those who have the virus from spreading it to others. Okay? So at this time, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
The dog seconded.
Unanimous over here.
Everyone,
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you very much.
It was great seeing everyone.
Good
Miss
seeing everybody.
you. Miss seeing
Take care. Stay
everyone.
safe. Thanks,
Bye,
Sheriff.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I just cannot imagine what the issue was.